Hey there, fictional friends, and welcome to another episode of Fully Booked. I'm Megan.
And I'm Shireen.
And it is our second week of coverage of YA thrillers over here on the podcast.
She's so excited.
I need you to sing Thriller, because I'm not going to do it.
Thrillers!
There you go. So today, since we're starting with a sort of discussion portion of the month, we figured that we would kind of talk about the transition that YA has had like in the thriller space, where we really went from like what was a bit more of like a procedural mystery to what we know now as like proper thrillers for teens and stuff like that. It's no longer just like your cute, here's our like little hometown mystery, and and we're gonna go and help solve like this mystery of this missing painting or something like that. Like, we are not doing that anymore.
Where did the roll of quarters go?
Yeah, no, it's not that anymore. Now it's just kind of like all of a sudden it's just like everybody's being murdered, and the main character needs to figure it out because they're probably going to be murdered before the end of the book. And you're
true.
like, whoa, okay,
what happened?
Where did that come from? How did we get from A to Z? Before we get started on that, Shireen, what's on your nightstand?
Well, I believe last month I left off by saying that I was reading the first Crescent City book by Sarah Maas, and now I am in the second Crescent City book.
Surprise, surprise. She's just rolling all the way through.
And, this one's a lot slower going.
Okay.
I think that what happened with the first one, there was world building, and then there was a bit of like a murder mystery kind of that kind of like wrapped up at the end.
Okay.
And then it was like, well, where's this going to go now? And so now the second one is almost like we're building another story.
Oh.
Within the same world, and so it's a little bit slow going, I will say, and I'm like scratching my head, and I've read online that a lot of people like do not finish this series because they find it just too slow.
Okay.
I really enjoyed the first one after I got through all the world building. So I'm like, I'm going to power through the second one because I'm like, all right, it's slow, but I believe in Sarah Maas. I believe this is going somewhere.
So it's so funny because you're saying that to me, and I haven't touched the Crescent City books at all, and I don't know like the story at all in them, but that sounds to me a lot like, okay, if you read A Court of Thorns and Roses by itself, it's kind of got a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Right.
And it sort of wraps up, and technically you could have left it. No one would have wanted that. But you could have left it that way, and you would have been like, okay. I guess that was like an okay fantasy romance, essentially, and there was like, a lot of action in that latter third, and there you go, and we wrapped it up and we killed the bad guy, and there you go.
Yeah.
But then it's almost like the second book turns it into a completely different series, and so I kind of wonder if that's her pattern to a degree.
I've read Throne of Glass, but I read it a while ago now, so I think I need to reread it because like I can't, and now I'm like thinking about it, now that you've pointed this out, I wonder if it was the same for the first one, where you're kind of introduced to a character and you think you know who this character is. And it kind of wraps up the first one, and then by the next one, you're like, holy shit, this has gone in a completely different direction.
You're suddenly like, whoo!
I think it's kind of maybe her trend.
Maybe.
And I think she's just perfecting this art as she moves
slowly
through.
but surely as she goes on. Yeah, that's it. And I mean, obviously, people are liking the formulas.
Definitely. So anyway, I'll let you know by the time I get to the end of this one what the sitch is.
Yeah.
But what about you, Megan? What's on your nightstand?
So I'm actually just finishing The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley.
Yeah. I have that.
Yeah,
is it
which
good?
it's all right. I don't know, guys. I'm sorry. I listened to the audiobook a while back, like a few years ago, of The Guest List, which is another one of hers, and I just finished this one. And I don't know if maybe I need to like physically read, because I know audiobooks can be a bit different sometimes. Maybe I need to physically read a couple of other ones. It wasn't bad. It's not been bad the whole way through necessarily.
Great endorsement.
But I'm not like, I don't know, like it's like an okay thriller, but I'm not like, I wasn't like drawn into everything that was going on with the story. And yes, there are twists and turns, and there are people hiding things, and you don't know what's going on. But I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the writing. I don't know if for me it's just the plot itself isn't as much of interest as some other ones have been. But it's all just kind of like middle of the road, and I'm sure people are going to be mad because Lucy Foley is a really popular writer.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I guess for me that's just what it feels like more than anything. Essentially, this story, just a brief overview, this story follows a young woman who's coming to visit her half-brother in England, in Paris, where he's been living and working as a journalist. And she's arriving like very late at night, and and he's left her like a voice memo essentially before she gets there to let her know how to get into the building and everything. That he's living in one of these very old, very historic Paris buildings, like, you know how all the apartments there are like
my dream.
Yeah, like all the apartments there have like a very different. It's so different from North America anyway, and you can hear in the message that he's essentially cut off because someone has shown up out of the blue to see him, and when she arrives at the building, she cannot get in, and he is nowhere to be found. And so she spends the next number of days trying to speak to the other tenants, who are all acting fucking weird, and figure out what's happened to him and like where he is. And it's a book with multiple perspectives, so each chapter is like a different person, and it jumps back and forth, and it gives you like little pieces of the puzzle at a time. And all of that sounds like it should be really good, but I don't know, it just didn't hold my attention for a long period of time. It actually, like, for a thriller that's not an incredibly long read, it took me a while to get through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I bought it because I found it, like, for a good price. And I was like, oh, this is really popular. And then I read the back of it, and I was like,
yeah, I don't know. It's been fine so far. But I'm not, I don't know. I'm not overly impressed, and I'm sure people have opinions about that. But maybe somebody agrees with me, and, you know, we're like, hey, just because an author's a whatever bestseller, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody likes all their stuff all the time.
Yeah. And, like, just a comment about audiobooks, because as many of our listeners, as I know for a fact, because some of them come to me and talk to me about this, which is hilarious. Yeah. You know, audiobooks are available on Spotify Premium.
Yes, it's true.
You're only allowed 15 hours a month, which, you know, was fine this month as I was, like, flip-flopping between different ones. I kind of listened to them, like, as, like, a nothing story, like, before bed to kind of put me to sleep.
Yeah.
I was listening to A Touch of Darkness. I can't. Like, I'm sorry, but I can't.
You need to stop listening to the romance.
Oh my God! Like,
because you tried it with Twisted.
With Twisted Love. I can't. Like, it takes away all the seriousness out of it.
Total tangent, by the way. So I had listened to a part of Twisted Love.
You didn't listen to the whole thing.
I can't do this.
You didn't like the stupid voice that she.
No. Actually, the guy was okay, but hers was like, I wasn't a fan. Anyway, and I gave up, and I was like, oh, fuck it, for fuck's sake. So I just read the rest of the book.
Yeah.
And then I read all of them because I was like, fuck it. I just want to see if all of them. I want to see if all of them are this insane, and they vary. I find in levels. Some of them, like, it's much more reasonable.
Okay.
And again, I hope, at least I will say, there's no, like, nobody has to sign a contract, and no one's like, oh, I'm into BDSM. Like, they're not. It's just slightly rough sex, guys. Calm down. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, but these are popular, and I
think because they're not, I think probably because people are like, oh, good, because I really feel like 50 Shades of Grey totally lied about that, and at least this one is just telling you what it is.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I listened to the first one, and I'm like, I can't, because I really don't care about these characters, probably because of the stupid voice. And then I did the same thing with A Touch of Darkness, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't care, because this isn't sexy. It's just hilarious to listen to.
Yeah, I read A Touch of Darkness. It wasn't bad. I was like, yeah, all right.
Yeah.
I think with those, I think you have to
actually read it, because I have it on my shelf. But then I started listening to How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. Yeah. And that was actually good. And of course, I fucking ran out of listening time.
You did.
And I'm like, oh, I want to know what happened.
Well, you know what? We're heading into a new month, so you can, on our end of things anyway. Yeah. Right now when we're recording, we're heading into a new month, so you'll be fine, and you can listen to the rest of it.
Exactly.
How to Sell a Haunted House was a good one. I have like favorites of Grady Hendrix's, and that one was quite good. I really liked it.
Well, probably, you know, I'm thinking to myself that I'm gonna like stop. Like, I'm gonna do a Megan. I'm gonna like stop reading Crescent City at the end of the second one. Give myself a break. So I might read the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix after. It looks like a fun summer read.
That's my favorite of his so far, I will say.
So anyway, sorry, we digress.
It doesn't matter. We've digressed for too long. Anyway, okay, so let's talk about YA thrillers, and let's talk about, like, whoa, how did we get from this to this? Like, how did we get from Nancy Drew to One of Us is Lying? Like, where did that happen? When did that happen?
Like, where someone's actually dead.
Yeah, and I mean, like last week we talked about there's someone inside your house. Like, people are killed very violently in that story, and you're like, whoa.
And whoa. Like, again, it's not, hey, I lost my roll of quarters, can you help me find it.
No.
It's like there's someone literally killing people and putting it on the internet. Like,
no. And look, like we're being like funny and digressing in the sense that like Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys and like those types of like teen mysteries. No, it wasn't like find a roll of quarters,
No.
but there don't feel like there are quite as many stakes in those stories in the sense that the person, like, okay, so this is a point that you brought up that I thought was really good when we were kind of chatting about this, was that these types of mysteries feel very much like, oh, it's like an Agatha Christie mystery or like a Sherlock Holmes, in the sense that the person who's the main character, so either the brothers or Nancy Drew or
like
whatever.
The detectives.
Yeah, they're like your detective, and so they're just given a mystery, like, oh, look, here is whatever this mystery is, and we must solve it.
And then they have to like talk to people and interview them, and like it's a real, to your point, like a formulaic mystery where they've been dropped in the mystery. And I always found that with these ones, and like same with like Agatha Christie and Poirot to an extent, like maybe not, but like the conclusion was often something more innocent than it seemed throughout the story.
Yeah, like maybe with Agatha Christie, not as much. Like people were being murdered, and there was actual danger involved and things like that. Not as often, again, for either Poirot or Miss Marple or whatever, like things like that.
That's who I'm thinking of, Miss Marple. Sorry.
Hers are a lot more like cozy.
Yeah, exactly.
But she's a little old lady.
Well, I know. I picture Agatha Christie as Miss Marple. That's my bad.
I feel like she might have almost based her on herself to a degree, anyway. Probably. And I think that again, it gives you that level of disconnect.
Yeah.
Because the character is just like, oh, I'm going to come in and solve this mystery, or I'm the police and I'm going to come in and solve this mystery, or in this case, I'm just a kid who's really good at solving mysteries, and I'm going to come in and do that. Whereas when you transition away from that and you look at like the most sort of popular reads now that are coming out, they're all like, oh, I'm part of what's happening. So I'm part of, there's some people are being killed in town, or my friend group is being targeted, or my family has a secret, and because of that, they're being targeted by someone. Like, it's all of those aspects of things.
It's very personal, and like the characters are very developed in these stories. Like, again, like in Nancy Drew, the Hardy Boys, like they'll go and they'll interview, or they'll ask a witness a question, and you'll get kind of a, one side of them or like a facet of them, and you'll just get like a snapshot of one point in time of who they are.
And then you kind of only get more of them if they turn out to be the person involved in the mystery.
Exactly. And then they have to, then you hear their story a little bit more. But like in the current state, you get like the whole kit and caboodle about all the characters who are involved and their connections, their interactions together. And you start to feel very connected to them as well. Like I remember in One of Us is Lying, when I was reading it, it was like, you're kind of reading it and you're like, I don't want any of these people to be the killer, because like I like all of them.
I'm becoming attached to each of these characters because you're getting all of this information about them. When you don't have that information, you don't care. You're like, I don't care.
You just want to get to the end. You're like, oh, who did it?
Yeah, I don't care who the killer is. Like, it doesn't really like make a difference in your life. You kind of just want to solve the mystery.
Exactly.
So you're like, oh, I just want to know who did this. But when it's particularly with like, your like few leads, like whether it flops back and forth between perspective, like it's multiple POVs, or it just follows one central narrator, whatever the story might be, you kind of get attached oftentimes, unless you hate the character for whatever reason. You kind of get attached to
You're normally
them.
led to hate the character though, like
usually like usually if it's like one person's a piece of shit, or like they're very annoying, or whatever the situation might be. There's just like a really big difference. So we were trying to figure out, to an extent, like we're like, when did this start happening? Like, when did we start seeing this kind of change? And I guess I find anyway that in like the 80s and then into the 90s, we kind of started getting a little bit of a change that way, because you started having authors like Christopher Pike and R.L. Stine, who, like with like the Fear Street series, and Christopher Pike's like extremely famous for all of like the very teen, again, they were like mysteries to an extent, but there was more of an element of like stakes to them, and there were more, and the characters were again becoming involved directly in what was going on. It wasn't like, I'm going to go and solve this from an outside perspective. It was like, oh shit, this person's after me, or this haunting is happening to me. There was a lot of supernatural stuff in those books, but there was like a like much more of an aspect like that. And then that kind of, I think that opened the door for certain things, and I almost feel like the people who were reading those books in the 80s and 90s grew up and started writing their own books.
And they're like, let's do this.
And they were like, hey, I too would like to do something like that. So now instead of the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew, you get One of Us is Lying, you get The Good Girl's Guide to Murder, you get The Cheerleaders, you get like all of these different kinds of stories that are super, super popular because it was seriously, like, I know I said this previously, but honestly, if you go into the YA section at the bookstore, if it's not a fantasy, it's something like this specifically. It's one of these, and it's just like this murder, or I have to, like, you know, figure out what happened to my brother or sister who disappeared. Those kinds of things.
And, you know, when we were talking about it earlier, I was thinking about, like, you know, for me personally, like, I would never say that, like, like, mystery or something is my jam. Like, I wouldn't, like, be like, that's my favorite. But then when you think about it, like, I, like many millennials, were introduced to my obsession of reading through Harry Potter. And if you think about the Harry Potter series, up until probably the fourth one, I would solidly say the first three. They are kind of built like a mystery almost. And, like, especially the third one, that one was definitely my favorite because I think it was a different ending, like, almost. You know, it wasn't like, oh, yeah, it's Voldemort again. It was somebody of Voldemort's side.
And you were like, oh, okay, now we're getting a direct link to him, but, like, through a different kind of
different character. But it was, like, one of these, the same way that we're talking, there's high stakes and it's super involved in the character relationships.
And it took and again, that was the first book that takes a turn where you're like, ooh, I really feel
twist.
I really feel like these kids are, like, in this now.
Like, they're super in this. They've spent this time, like, trying to figure out who it was, and it was this big twist at the end where you're like, holy shit, like, this was, like, exciting.
Like, I was not expecting this at all, and the tone of the novel is quite different from the first two. You know, and you're like, okay, there's stuff that happen, like, you know, like, they have to fight things and do all of this stuff in the first couple of books, but those books feel so much more for kids. And then when you get to that third one, you start being like, oh, okay, we're moving into that, like, middle grade YA territory now.
Like, there's high stakes now, you know, like, things are getting there, but and then obviously after that it's like, okay, it's Voldemort, you know.
But like, but it also continues. She continued to build on it for a period of time, like, for each subsequent book after that, you know, it was
there was
built
that
upon
mystery like aspect to all of them, like, ooh, like, what's gonna happen next. And so I find that, like, it's kind of become ingrained in a lot of the stories. Like, even I talk about Sarah Moss, you know, like, you devour those books because you're like, I want to know, like, what the mystery is, like,
I want to know what the whole, like, this whole thing that we're trying to figure out, or the way that we're trying to figure out to fix what's coming. I want to get to that point. I want to find out what the hell is going on and how we're going to take care of it. Like, how these characters are going to get through this, essentially. It's true. So it comes through in a lot of them. I find I guess there's to a degree too, I kind of wonder with I guess I wonder a little bit because of the demographic of people who are reading these books, because, like, we're talking about this a lot, like, largely to a degree because a lot of people who are not young adults are reading these young adult thrillers.
Right.
And so I wonder if the age of, like, the audience to a degree has something to do with the way that these authors are choosing to write their stories, and that also publishers are picking them up so much as well.
Well, it's true. I mean, like, you know, as a kid, you would get Nancy Drew, or you would see the Hardy Boys. Like, my mom wouldn't sit there reading Nancy Drew or the Hardy Boys, you know, but, like, we certainly would sit there and read, like, One of Us is Lying, or, like, you know, all these
But
ones.
it was also, like, this, but it was also, like, you know, when our parents were younger, Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys, that was what was available. Right? It's the same way that you might watch, what am I trying to think of? The Exorcist, right? And be like, wow, that was, you know, a good film, a bad film, whatever your feeling is about it, you feel whatever type of way you do.
Don't tell Megan it was a bad film.
It's a really well-made movie. It's not my favorite, but it's a really well-made film. And you might be like, oh, it was good, it was bad, it was whatever, I'm indifferent to it, whatever the situation might be, but and so you don't understand why at the time it was like maybe such like a massive success, and it was like so lauded by people, but you also, then you have to put yourself in the mindset of the 1970s and how much of a hold the Catholic Church still had over a lot of different aspects of life, and how people still tended to be much more religious largely than you see regularly today. And it was like a much more still well-regarded thing to go to church on a regular basis and things. And look, like, I'm thinking of this from the perspective of a North American person as well. Obviously, depending on where you are in the world, it makes a big difference. But if I'm thinking of something like sort of like North American, like Catholicism, essentially, still had a pretty big hold at that time. And so writing a novel like this and making a film like this, people had such a strong reaction to it. And it was much scarier to people at that time because it wasn't something that had been done often previously, particularly not for a mass audience. And so it's how everything like this is shocking when it first comes out. And so now I feel like, because all of these things have, to a degree, because a lot of these stories, all this Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys mysteries and stuff like that are sort of old hat at this point. It's like it's like
reinventing it almost.
Publishers know and editors know that audiences want something with a little bit more like pizzazz to it to a degree. They're like, we need something a little bit more intense. Than we've gotten before. And so I think that I'm really curious to see, even in the next 20, 30 years, how that might even shift. Like, how much more intense are we going to get about this?
It could go in the completely opposite direction.
I wonder. If we decide we want something like a little bit more lighthearted again than we're getting now, because now we're not getting very much of that. But I kind of wonder, how people feel about like these YA mysteries. Like, do you read them at all? Are you somebody who still prefers the classics? Like, would you rather read like a Nancy Drew or something like that? Or, have you devoured pretty much all of the newer ones that have been published in the last decade?
Especially since they're all making all of them into adaptations.
Yeah, they're all movies and TV series.
The Good Girl's Guide to Murder is
I believe that's coming out this year, if I'm not mistaken. So all of these are getting. One of Us Is Lying got an adaptation. There are other ones that are on their way. We just watched There's Someone Inside Your House. A lot of these are getting regular adaptations. I guess it doesn't fall into the same category quite as much, but We Were Liars has an adaptation. I cannot
wait for that one. That book, I don't know why it had such a profound impact on me.
I don't think I'd classify that one as quite as much of a thriller, more of a psychological drama of some kind, but still
getting adapted.
Still getting an adaptation from Prime. So you know what? These things are picking up steam. So it's going to be really interesting to see whether the demographic who keeps up with these are our age or whether they're actually younger than us. I don't know, because right now I feel like it's everybody our age, which is really funny.
And Gen Z's like, what are you
guys doing? That's really violent. What's wrong with all of you?
Peace and love, people.
Yeah, that's it. Anyway, we'll see how it goes. But no matter what your feelings are about all of this, you can let us know about that over on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at FullyBookedCA. And you can also check out our Facebook group, which is at facebook.com/groups/book was way better. But until next week, guys, keep on reading.
Thanks, everyone.